Dusk on the Switch. Never thought we would actually be here. It's pretty weird to be able to actually boot this up on my Switch, a console I do not gravitate towards when it comes to shooters, like at all. I got Doom 2016 in the early years of the Switch because I was still in that phase of it's portable though, and to be honest, not even gyro controls made my experience better. It was never about how the games looked. I'm fully aware the Switch is a weak console and all in comparison to a PlayStation or an Xbox, especially in the next gen, but it's really just the Joy-Cons. The analog sticks on these things were not designed with fast-paced FPS games in mind, that much is clear. The placement and the overall feel of them just kind of suck for this genre. That being said, when Dusk was announced for the Switch in 2020, I was pretty hyped up. Dusk was and still is one of my favorite shooters of all time. It's one of the few games I try to recommend to people as much as I can. Because even if you aren't into these kinds of shooters, you can still have a solid time with Dusk. The game's accessibility options like full-blown bot-level aim assist to cynical levels of FOV scaling are great. All of it works well so you can essentially make Dusk as comfortable for you as you need it. The level design, enemy design, weapon flips, back flips, front flips, soap being the strongest weapon in the game. And did I mention you can fucking backflip? If the bare look of Dusk isn't enough, you can even bump up the pixelated look to make it feel like you're still in the good old days. The days that seemingly passed you by and now you're left with nothing but memories. At the end of the day, it's a shooter, but all these little added things make it stick out in the best way possible. I cannot recommend Dusk to you on PC enough. But what about the Switch version? The reason you even clicked on this video. Remember what I said about the Switch with first-person shooters? Well, thankfully, very little of those negatives translate into Dusk on Switch. Dusk on the Nintendo Switch is truly a marvel to behold. Did you ever think to yourself that you needed Dusk on the Switch? Did you ever run through Endless Mode or any of the episodes and think, man, I wish I could take this with me to work or while I'm dropping a shit? Well, even if that thought has never crossed your mind, developer New Blood Interactive has got you covered. And just in time, too. Dusk at its core is simply a first-person shooter that harkens back to the boomer shooter era of Quake and Doom. That grimy, pixelated look of Dusk mixes incredibly well with the setting it's trying to present. Hooded cultists and demon cows or whatever these are, scarecrows pretending to just be inanimate crow intimidators but eventually jump out at you with malicious intent. And rats, effectively annoying rats that nibble at your legs conveniently in the middle of fights. Dusk on PC plays extremely well, there's no question about that. Every weapon is satisfying and useful for various situations, and the feedback these guns present to you is fantastic. It feels so good to run up to a hooded chainsaw guy and blow him to literal low poly chunks before he can even say, "Non-believer." The movement around the levels feels also natural and fluid. Running to a giant fan on the ground to propel yourself in the air for a backflip shotgun blast finish is just something you can't get anywhere else. Despite all the massive positives of Dusk on PC, I was excited for Dusk on Switch, but I couldn't help but constantly remind myself of other first-person shooters on the Switch, and just not enjoying the experience delivered. So, it is with pleasure that I can say that Dusk on the Nintendo Switch is very, very good. I was nervous about how Joy-Cons would feel, and while I would definitely prefer to use an Xbox controller as an alternative, the Joy-Cons do a serviceable job of translating the Dusk experience on the go. It even has different levels of sensitivity and various levels of aim assist to help you make your time a little bit smoother, from 0 to pretty much full-blown aimbot. With these options alone, Dusk is a cut above the rest on the Switch. I remember following the development timeline of the Switch version for Dusk. What was so interesting to me was that this is no Switch port from the PC version. Dusk on the Switch is the Switch version. So much care and love has gone into making sure this version can stand up to its predecessor. It's so good to see that for the most part, they nailed it. The only issue I really faced in my time with Dusk was the occasional frame rate dips in usually wider open areas or areas chock full of enemies. Still, even in some of the busiest rooms, Dusk never dipped below 60 FPS. I'm of course just going by my eyes here, but if you want the nitty-gritty on just how well Dusk performs on the Switch, Digital Foundry did a video covering just that. So much of Dusk that is just so good ultimately transfers over well, especially the music. You can finally go to your favorite coffee shop or a bar with your friends and put the volume all the way up on your Switch while playing Dusk, while your friends attempt to talk over you and wonder why they even invited you. The main takeaway from all of this is that Dusk on Switch is a must-buy. even with the not so great Joy-Cons for the genre. New Blood managed to overcome this obstacle with ease, and as of right now, Dusk is the ideal first-person shooter on the Nintendo Switch, and it's really good to see someone finally nail that. Thanks so much for watching, and thank you to New Blood for providing the code for Dusk on Switch. If you haven't checked out New Blood's other games, check them out on Steam, so you too can wait for Gloomwood to come out any day now.
Heretic.